Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking the incredibly dedicated frontline emergency responders who are working under tremendously difficult circumstances to suppress the fire and keep residents safe. And to the residents of Fort McMurray, as someone who knows firsthand how scary and hard it is to leave behind your home and your community, my heart is with you now in these early days, but will also continue to be with you in the many days, weeks, months, and years to come. I also want to thank Albertans for the tremendous outpouring of support to date, including the continued donations to the Canadian Red Cross, the sharing of firefighting resources from across the province, and our industry partners who are both sharing firefighting resources and providing places for evacuees to stay. Our focus at this time remains completely and entirely on ensuring residents and our first responders and firefighters are safe and secure. We have reached out to the federal government and they are aware of the severity of the situation in Fort McMurray. I have just gotten off the phone with Premier Notley, who recently got off the helicopter in Fort McMurray and is now at the newly set up Emergency Operations Centre. She was joined on her way by a team of officials, and as a result of the conversations and due to the severity and scope of the situation, Cabinet has declared a provincial state of emergency. Mayor Melissa Blake and the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo have done a tremendous job of leading these emergency operations to date. However, to better support the municipality and their emergency operations in Fort McMurray, the provincial state of emergency will enable us to bring more measures to support those operations to the table. We want to thank them for their work to date, and we will continue to work side by side with them, together managing this devastating disaster. A provincial state of emergency will also allow us to access additional resources from outside the province. The federal government is aware that Alberta's displaced families will need financial support in the days and months to come for both emergency response and rebuilding. Our thoughts are with the strong, resilient people of Fort McMurray. Albertans who are affected by the wildfire can find information on the Government of Alberta website as well as social media. We continue to work to ensure everyone has found secure lodging, whether it be with friends or family, at one of the reception centres, or in the home of the many individual Albertans who have opened their doors in this time of crisis. At this time, all of Fort McMurray area remains under a mandatory evacuation with upwards of 80,000 people affected. Reception centres have been set up at the Lac La Biche Bold Centre, Edmonton Northlands Halls A and D, the Anzac Recreation Centre, Wapasu Creek Lodge, Horizon North Black Sand Lodge, and the Suncor Firebag Village. As I speak, thousands of evacuees are heading to Edmonton, where we are working with our partners to establish reception centres in the city. We also, unfortunately, just heard moments ago about a vehicle collision on the highway. We do know there are fatalities associated with that collision. However, we're still not sure of the association with the evacuation. So we will provide more information about that. Emergencies of this magnitude do require coordination between many levels of government and community partnerships. The response has been what we expect from Albertans: wholehearted and strong. But we are still in the throes of an intense crisis, and our fire crews are working around the clock to reduce the threat of the fire to people, to homes, and to infrastructure. The fire conditions today remain extremely challenging. Our government is working closely with the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo to ensure the evacuation of homes and neighborhoods is orderly and safe. The fire is actively burning in residential areas in Fort McMurray with significant structural loss. The current estimates has not changed from this morning. Around 1,600 structures have been lost. This afternoon, our responders are facing extreme fire conditions and rapidly changing fire behavior. The fire situation remains dynamic, and unfortunately, current temperatures and wind present extreme fire conditions. With 88 firefighters from regions around the province joining the fight overnight, there are approximately 250 firefighters currently battling this fire. We also have 12 pieces of heavy equipment and 12 helicopters engaged in suppression efforts at the Fort McMurray fire. We have a full complement of air support on this. The airspace above the Fort McMurray area is completely saturated with as many aircrafts as are safe to fight this firefighter, and the number changes hourly as firefighters adjust to conditions. Cross-government efforts are being closely coordinated out of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency Provincial Operations Centre, and ministries are supporting emergency response efforts and addressing the needs of evacuated residents in a number of ways. Alberta Agriculture and Forestry is supporting ongoing fire suppression efforts, and they will give an update on that shortly. Alberta Environment and Parks is providing support to evacuees that have gone to provincial campgrounds and are waiving fees for them. Alberta Health and Alberta Health Services are providing medical support to evacuees at reception centres. All patients at the Northern Lights Regional Health Centre have been evacuated and are being transferred to appropriate healthcare facilities. All of the evacuated acute care patients and continuing care clients will be flown to healthcare facilities in the Edmonton zone, where they will receive the care they need. Alberta Human Services Emergency Social Services are coordinating support to respond to the needs of evacuees and are resourcing staff for the reception centres. Alberta Transportation is monitoring road visibility conditions and supporting traffic management where required. As the Premier said this morning, our government has also called in the support of our federal government through the Department of National Defence, and they stand at the ready to offer any logistical support we need. They have already dispatched helicopters to provide logistical support in the region. As well, multiple communities across northern and central Alberta are dispatching structural firefighting equipment and assets to the region, including a sprinkler trailer from Slave Lake. Industry partners have offered the use of work camps to house evacuees, and Fort McMurray First Nation, Gregoire First Nation, and Fort Mackay First Nation have all opened their doors to evacuees. I'm also pleased to confirm that our government approved emergency funding of $2 million to the Red Cross to directly support evacuees as soon as possible. Albertans want to help. That is in our nature. And we're encouraging anyone who wants to donate to the evacuation and relief efforts to contact the Red Cross. At this time, we are not seeking volunteers. If you are evacuated, please keep your receipts for food purchases, accommodations, and other related expenses to provide to your insurer for possible reimbursement. Please be aware that a boil water advisory has been issued by the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo. This advisory does affect the camps within the region. Albertans can stay informed on the latest developments by downloading the Alberta Emergency Alert and Alberta Wildfire apps. Alberta Health Services has issued an air quality advisory for the Fort McMurray area. Residents are advised to take appropriate precautions. Mental health support is also available by calling Alberta's 24-hour mental health helpline at 1-877-303-2642. Please know that without doubt, this government is absolutely committed to supporting the people and community of Fort McMurray now and in the months and years to come, to respond to this threat and to assist you to recover once it is safe again to return home. As someone who has been through this, I want the people of Fort McMurray to know that I will be there with you. Albertans will be there with you as we all pull together in this time of need. All Albertans are behind you now when you are displaced from your homes. All Albertans will be there with you to rebuild. And as Albertans, we will come together to see your recovery through, because that is the Alberta way. I'll now ask Scott Long from the Alberta Emergency Management Agency and Chad Morrison from Alberta Agriculture and Forestry to provide you with some more details before we answer your questions.
Thanks, Minister. Chad Morrison, Senior Manager with Wildfire in Agriculture and Forestry. I'm here to give you a brief update of what's going on in the fire as we know at this point. The fire is behaving as expected with the extreme fire behavior going on. The winds have shifted earlier in the day, and they're blowing from about 20 from the west, about 25, gusting to 40. The fire is still officially at just over 75 hectares in size. Reports on the ground, though, and we'll see the numbers later on tonight, are likely that the fire is going to be around the 10,000 hectare mark. Very hot and dry conditions out there with extreme wildfire behavior is occurring on all fronts around the fire at this time. We are actually seeing, at this point, we have our tanker groups working in the Timberley area and the Thickwood area, and they're seeing some success trying to hold it at the community, but it's very early at this stage. And we expect that this fire to be going on and challenging firefighters to well into the evening tonight for about 7 or 8 p.m. We also have helicopters working around the south section there where it's safe to do so, away from tankers in the Gregoire Estates area as well. So to summarize as well, one of the things that we're looking at, because of the smoke and the winds have shifted, we have moved our tanker operations away from the airport to our contingency bases, and so they're refueling out of adjacent tanker bases at this time. And still we're moving at least, we have 16 air tankers on this fire, and as the Minister said, 12 helicopters and over 100 wildland firefighters, with many more on the way from other jurisdictions across Canada. We've had responses from Ontario, Quebec, BC, and many other partners, and as those resources start to filter in, they'll be assigned to the highest priority fires in the province. At this time, I want to take a moment to just thank the firefighters and the first responders, and everyone is working very hard and closely together with the municipal folks and the municipality and the excellent job that they're doing out there today. We expect the fire to continue to challenge us for the rest of the day. We have what's called rank 6 fire behavior, and the fire continues to expand outside on the borders and the edges of the fire at this time. And we'll know more later this evening as to the final size and what the final impacts are. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott for any further updates.
Good afternoon. Scott Long, Executive Director, Operations, Alberta Emergency Management Agency. So quickly, the POC remains at level 4. We have all of the federal partners, industry partners required to do the coordination, cross-government coordination required to provide the best support to the citizens of, or the Albertans in Fort McMurray. Right now, our priorities, again, remain the safety of all Albertans, including first responders, the confirmation of all evacuees, including their locations and their requirements, and obviously supporting the local authorities with anything that they may need. The sheer number of evacuees is creating some challenges you can well imagine. The Minister's already laid out the number of reception centres. I can tell you that we have opened up 2 more in Drayton Valley and St. Paul. And as well, we continue to work with our industry partners who've done great work in opening up their camps to displaced evacuees from Fort McMurray. As well, recent developments, TELUS has just shipped up 1,000 cell phones for first responders to use and provided free wireless in the area to assist in the efforts. A number of evacuees as well. Of the 80,000 that we are aware of, I will say again, the numbers are starting to get a little bit more precise. We have essentially 10,000 that are in the area of Fort McMurray North on Highway 63 in oil and gas camps. We are looking at the bulk of the evacuees being in the south of the province, displaced amongst a number of reception centers. Human Services right now, that is what they're doing. They were working with the community ESS workers, emergency social services workers from all of the communities at the provincial level as well, to make sure, and with our Red Cross and NGO partners, to make sure that we have located and are providing for the needs of all evacuees. We have people that are scattered to trailer parks, campgrounds as well, and obviously many are staying with family and friends. And I urge all evacuees to register with the Red Cross by calling 1-888-350-6070, and that'll help us to help you by helping us identify your locations and your needs. One update that's new, I'll give you a quick update on oil and gas facilities in the area. So we do know the following sites have been shut in. Enbridge pipelines are starting their shut-in procedures. Inter Pipelines, Shell, ATCO pipelines, Suncor, and AltaGas pipelines have all reduced down to non-essential personnel. They've enacted their emergency management plans, and obviously they're in the process, or they have already coordinated the evacuation of all of their workers. We are now tracking as well other fire starts across the province, which Chad can talk to, but I will talk briefly to one which is in the Lac St. Anne area, currently threatening Alexis Nakota First Nations. We have a First Nations field officer in location. The community is on 1 hour notice to move, evacuation notice to move as a precautionary right now. And I do know we have wildfire aviation assets and ground forces in that area. As I close, I just want to remind Albertans that they can stay up to date on the latest updates through the Alberta Emergency Alert app, the Alberta Wildfire app, and the Alberta Highways 511 app. The situation in Fort McMurray is not stable. It is unstable. The Regional Emergency Operations Center displaced from the airport in the south. By the airport, it has now moved down to the Nexon landfill, or Nexon site close to Anzac Reception Center. Precautionary move. D&D assets, so we had two search and rescue helicopters that were at the airport. They've also displaced to Conklin. Flight time is minimal, and they are on standby in case they are required to evacuate first responders in the area. I can tell you as well, as of 1 hour ago, the downtown core is being held through some Herculean efforts of the structural firefighters in the area. That's it for me.
Sure. Number of evacuees. We heard here this morning 80,000. We heard in Fort McMurray 88,000.
The numbers, as you're well aware of, are hard to pin down, and I'm sure that there will still be some work. I was not here for Slave Lake, but during Slave Lake, this went on for a number of weeks before we did get final clarity on it. Right now, the number we are using is 80,000, but I'm sure in the days to come, we'll pin that down.
And we've also, while we're on the topic, we've been told that in the neighborhood of 35,000 people have headed south. Now, if you add 35 to 10, you're well short of the 80. Does that mean that 35, give or take, are...
This morning's brief, I mentioned that we're looking at more than 70,000 people have moved south. Not 35,000, 70,000 have moved south.
Can you talk a little bit about the key infrastructure that you're trying to protect in the city and what the status of those things are? The hospital, water treatment plant, power stations?
Again, the water treatment plant is situated just to the east side of the Thickwood residential area. Right now, again, the latest from the wildfire forces who are really doing great work to try and hold and contain the fire in the Timberley and Thickwood area is that they're keeping that fire on the west side, and it is not encroached onto the water treatment plant as we're aware of right now. That does not mean that there's not been damage done to it. And I know that in the Provincial Operations Center, we're already planning on water purification and other unique capabilities if that does happen. In the downtown core, obviously, we're worried about all of that, hospital being key structure as well. And I can tell you that in the Gregoire area, where there is a bit of an industrial area, it's Fort McMurray, there's lots of industrial areas there. That one area, there is some encroachment. It was expected, it was planned for, and that's why there's a lot of wildfire air tankers and aviation support. And again, Chad can give you detail on it. That is in that specific area trying to contain that fire.
What about the bridge over the Athabasca?
Right now, I have no information that the bridge is damaged.
How about the airport? Is it safe? There was some talk that it could encroach towards the airport.
Precautionary moves from the airport. It is anywhere in the vicinity of Fort McMurray right now, to be clear, is not really safe because of the wildfire conditions. Is very dynamic, and it can move relatively quickly. The moves from the airport were precautionary only. And we wanted to make sure that we took advantage and we thought it through so that we did not have to evacuate the Emergency Operations Center with the flames, so to speak, licking at their boots.
I understand there are some more RCMP officers up in Fort Mac. What are they doing?
RCMP officers are continuing to patrol Highway 63, both north and south. They're assisting local authorities with regards to, not at a particular moment, but throughout the night and tonight as well. They'll be patrolling through the area to make sure that there are no people that decided to stay in place and that sort of thing. On Highway 63, we have a contract out with bulk refuelers that are refueling vehicles that ran out of gas on Highway 63 towards this morning. A lot of them have been helped. I know that transportation has also got food and some water that they've been giving those folks who've been stranded. And transport, as of 1 hour ago, has now set up refuel stations on Highway 63, first one being 60 kilometers south of Fort McMurray, and there will be other ones, subsequent ones south of that too.
Sorry, can I just ask you, James Cook from BBC News, can I just ask you, is anybody missing?
Right now, good question. I talked to the RCMP 1 hour ago, and I asked that specific question, and right now, through our NGO organizations, through the RCMP, we have not been told of anybody is missing. We have not been informed of, we have actually, as of about 5 minutes ago, as the minister briefed, we have a vehicle accident, that there are casualties. I'm not at liberty right now to confirm if it's related to this situation, but those details will come out later.
Sorry, we're just going to take a call from the phone, please. Operator, can I have the first phone call?
Your first audio question comes from the line of Don Braid with the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Hello. Yesterday, you folks were saying correctly, as it turned out, today would be extremely difficult. Can you give us some indication of how tomorrow is going to be? I don't hear you saying. You seem to be saying that, if I caught you correctly, that tonight, by this evening, things might be easing off. But could you give us a projection for tomorrow now?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Chad Morrison from Wildfire here. Yeah, the expected temperature we have tomorrow is 18 degrees. We're still going to have lower humidities in the mid-20s. So it will be a day that we'll actually be able to safely deploy firefighters in some of the critical areas as we go. I think we'll still be challenged over the next number of days, at least till the weekend, in terms of the wildfire itself. It's a very, very large wildfire, and I expect our firefighters to be at this for a large number of days fighting this fire.
But there was an estimation this morning. One official said this morning, when asked if the community would be safe and would still basically exist by this evening, didn't give an answer, didn't quite say no. We're wondering if the overall danger to this city is easing, or is it still there in such a major way?
From a wildfire perspective, we need to get through the day here until we get to about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and we'll have a better indication where things stand. If we get through tonight, I think we'll have a day tomorrow where we might have some continued success. Again, it's very, very early in the day. The situation is very, very dynamic and fluid, and we expect this wildfire to continue to challenge all firefighters throughout the day today.
Operator, can we have the second call on the line, please?
Your next question comes from the line of Virginia Bouchard from French CBC. Your line is open.
I was wondering if you just remind how many acres have burned so far.
Yeah, the official number we have right now is just over 7,500 hectares. And like I said, once we have sort of more intelligence, once the smoke is cleared a little bit later this evening, we expect it to be around the 10,000 hectare mark.
Okay, thank you.
Operator, can I have the next call on the line, please?
Your next question comes from the line of Tamara Kondaker from Vice News. Your line is open.
Hi. I was wondering, is there any reason for people who are in the work camps north of the city to be concerned? Just because I've spoken to people who've said that Highway 63 is the only road coming out of there, and if anything happens, that they're going to be stuck. So are you able to say for certain that the fire won't shift in that direction?
Good question. It's something we're looking at. Again, when 80,000 people leave at a relatively short period of time, it's very hard to control. It is managed chaos. Our preference would have been that most evacuees head south. That is not where we are right now. We're dealing with the fire in the Fort McMurray area. I can tell you that there is still some capacity in those camps, which are fairly robust and well-stocked in the north. But at first opportunity, one of our preferences is to start thinning those camps out and start moving them down towards the south when it is safe to do so. We need to stabilize the situation in Fort McMurray before we can do that.
Okay.
Operator, can I have the next call on the line, please?
Your next question comes from the line of Ian Austin with the New York Times. Your line is open.
Hi. A further question on the camps. The camps that are being used, are they ones that were in active service right now, or have some of the camps that were recently, that have been shut down over the past year, reopened just to receive evacuees? And if so, are they, is there sufficient water, food, that sort of thing at them?
I think there are a combination of both those. Some of those camps were open. Some of the lodges had personnel in it, reduced numbers. And as you can well imagine, a lot of employees for oil and gas live in Fort McMurray. So once they were starting to evacuate, then obviously there was room in those camps. Again, we've been told sufficient water and food. They are managing, and they're managing right now. Part of the federal assistance is air transport. So right now, this evening, we will have access to a CJ-130 Hercules aircraft, which can land on relatively austere runways. We are currently looking at right now loading that up with water, food, etc., and pushing that out to those communities. That could happen this evening, or could happen sometime tomorrow. Again, we want to make sure the situation is stable before we do that. But right now, there's no immediacy. But certainly, we want to make sure that we start getting food and water pushed out as of tomorrow.
Minister, you've spoken about the state of emergency. It allows more resources. Can you be more specific on what that actually means?
Again, for the most part, again, it allows us to provide additional support. There's some additional powers in place to access resources from out of province. In terms of the specifics, actually, Scott can probably give you even additional details on that.
We were told this morning we don't need more powers. So what changed?
The provincial state of emergency essentially makes the situation ours. We were providing support to the community. Based on where we are as of today, and the damage assessment that was provided this morning, a surprise to a lot of people. The severity of it is going to be a long-term recovery. In terms of response, provincial state of emergency gives us control of the situation. Not that Fort McMurray wasn't doing a great job. We now have a lot of assets in there, and unified command is required from our perspective. And there are some fairly significant challenges, again, in terms of access control. We want to make sure we watch out for price gouging. There has been no reports of that. But these are all the sorts of powers that the province now has. And extraordinary measures as well in terms of conscripting people to assist in the crisis. It has not happened, but if we needed to, we could bulldoze down structures to create fire breaks. Those are all extraordinary and extremist measures which have not been done, but those are the powers we now have. And I think largely the decision for provincial state of emergency lends itself to the recovery and the response, which will take months to years for sure.
The military assistance, we know there's helicopters and airlifting this. Do we know when we could see boots on the ground up there, firefighters like we saw St.
We're having the conversations. As a matter of fact, the commander of Joint Task Force West is in the Provincial Operations Center as we stand right now, General Wayne Eyre. We are going to have those conversations. The door is open. The advance notice has been given. They're not trained wildfire fighters or structural firefighters. We do not want to put them into that area until it stabilizes. Once it stabilizes, I think for access control, there'll be a period of time where we need to make sure that we have access control and we're controlling the access into Fort McMurray until we make sure it's safe for residents to come back and see their neighborhoods. And clearly that has to be planned and organized, and that's going to take a little time.
So are there any other military assets on the ground now aside from the Griffins and the Herc?
No, not right now. Again, the conversation and the planning is happening. If we need additional resources, that door is open. But until, again, we stabilize and get a chance to have a look at the water treatment plant, I can't tell DND that we need water purification requirements. I've warned them off of that, but I can't confirm it yet.
Any thought how this fire started at this point?
Yeah, Chad Morrison with Alberta Wildfire again. At this point, the fire is still under investigation. This time of year, human-caused wildfires are generally the cause that we see, but we've also had lightning fires already early in the season, so right at this point, we're working with investigators to determine if it's either a lightning or a human-caused fire, and we won't know that for a couple of days yet, at least until we're safe to get in.
Where did it start?
Yeah, you can see actually right where the dot is here. That's the general area where we believe it started. So again, it's out in the forested area. So again, we want to confirm whether it's been lightning or a human-caused type wildfire.
Give that area a name. For non-locals, what would you call that?
So we've named the fire it's a Horse Creek fire at this point. But yeah, it's just south of the Athabasca River and towards and just south and west of town there. So.
Like, or is it just in the
middle? No, in the middle of the forested area, yes.
You said the growth this afternoon, the growth today is mostly on the outskirts of it. It's growing away from the community?
Yeah, so right now we had westerly wind shift this morning, and obviously we're being challenged on these fronts here and here. And then as we're expected for the winds tonight, those winds are expected to turn to the south, to the northwest, come from the northwest. So we're going to see this southern part here pick up here in the next 2 to 3 hours, and we're going to see how that happens right now. So
away from the community, looking at that.
Yeah, but there is lots of components of the community below here, and then the airport. There's the airport over here as well, which is a critical piece of infrastructure for everybody.
Why exactly is there a boil water advisory for everyone up there? Can you talk me through why?
And sorry, just as Scott's going up, we only have time for one more question after this. Thanks.
Again, precautionary. We're not sure of the state of the water treatment plant. We're not sure how it's functioning. So just a precautionary. Once we stabilize and we get a chance to go on in, we can definitely confirm the state of it and the functioning order. So precautionary only.
So is this sorry if this is the last question, but is the focus of the firefighting protecting that infrastructure then, protecting the hospital, protecting the water treatment plant, or is there a more broad battle right now?
Well, initially the focus on protecting lives. Our priority right now still is the safety of the first responders, the firefighters, very dynamic. We want to make sure if the wind shifts, we have assets available to pull people out. Part of the structural firefight, and I'm not an expert, but part of that is the protection of critical infrastructure. So I know that they worked all night, the structural firefighters and the wildfire fighters, based on the knowledge of the winds and how it was going to play out today to reinforce and put in defensive areas, sprinkler kits to aid in that fight. So downtown core, in the area of the industrial area, over in the residential areas of Timberley and Thickwood, sorry. And certainly there's been a lot of work done towards the south down by the airport. Whether they last, that's what we have to see in the next 4 hours.
Have any residents been found there? Are there still residents in town that have been told to get out?
We have no reports of that at all.
Okay, we're just going to make one clarification before we have to go. Thank you.
So just regarding the provincial state of emergency, just to make it clear that it was in response to the dynamic, ever-changing situation with this. Certainly, we had hopes about what might happen overnight, but recognized that conditions were challenging today. And in conversation with Mayor Melissa Blake and with the Emergency Operations Center there, it just, they really required additional support at that time. So, working with them and ensuring that we respect them as partners. We reached the decision together that they needed those provincial assets. But certainly it does give us a lot of powers to ensure that it progresses appropriately.
Up to this point, is the Fort McMurray Fire Chief calling the shots up there then?
We certainly had field officers there who were working in close collaboration with the Emergency Operations Center. We had the team here working constantly, providing them support with planning and direction. From the provincial perspective, we were looking after provincial concerns from this perspective. But in terms of coordinating the whole response, there was value to shifting it from that local state of emergency to a provincial state of emergency.
Calling the shots, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, you could probably clarify exactly who made what call on that one, but yeah.
Up until the provincial state of emergency was called, the structural firefight within the community was the community's lead. The DEM and the fire chief, supported by AEMA and a number of IMT professionals, incident management team professionals from throughout the province, Strathcona County. You can imagine this takes a couple hours or a 24-hour shift to doing this is very taxing. So you need to have that relief. Canada Task Force 2 is deploying up 2 IMT teams, Type 2, which are very capable. ESS, Emergency Social Services workers, and truckloads of equipment as we speak.
Okay, thanks so much for coming today, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the update.